None of us are strangers to the saying, life isn't easy. I'm aware of that. But one thing that I find so ironic is the fact that we make easy decisions in our life that later come back to haunt us, and then we question why our life feels so hard in the moment. I always used to think that easy decisions meant that the rest of my life would just be easy. And I used to think that if I kept making these hard, difficult decisions, then it would just be a cycle of harder decisions that I would have to make each day. But then as I realized, maybe it's not as upfront as it really seems, I started to realize that when I tried to make my life easier, it only made it harder because I was just avoiding what actually was important in my life. I feel like people don't recognize this enough that within your day to day life and within your weekly routine or your daily routine, there are going to be moments where you have to make hard decisions, where you have to push yourself to be beyond what you are right now. Or else, if you don't do that, you can obviously make the easy decision. However, what comes with that is there's just not a real satisfaction to your life. I used to think whenever I used to make very, very hard decisions and I strive to make myself very uncomfortable. Every time I made these decisions, the first thing I always thought of was, why don't I just make the easy decision today? Why don't I just try and make life easier? If I tried to be overly disciplined, I would think about just laying at home and resting. If I tried to work overly hard, I would think, man, why don't I just go easy today? And then whenever I went easy to the point where I wasn't pushing myself to be any better, to where I wasn't trying to be anything above what I was at the moment, I started to realize that I always, if I was on the low end of the spectrum, I would want the high end. And if I was on the higher end of the spectrum, I would always long for the low end. And then that confused me. And I thought, why do I always seek for the opposite each time? And I kind of came to a conclusion that however much you level up, something down here will always try and call your name, and vice versa. If you are just down here, there will always be a higher calling in your life, and you know that as well. I think the saying that would accurately describe this best is easy decisions make your life hard, and hard decisions make your life easier. We don't realize it in the moment because it's so difficult, especially just on a personal standpoint. It's so difficult to make these hard decisions every day because it requires me to be fully present in the moment, which is something I'm not always able to do. It requires me to want change, which is not something I always want to pursue in my life. Sometimes I'm scared to change because I always think to myself, whenever the idea of change is a possibility in my life, I think, what if it's not going to be as good as it was? And that's a reason that I haven't had a lot of growth in my life, or I feel like I've held myself back from opportunities, is because I always feared the other side. And I thought that whatever experiences I've had will never lead to the experiences I will get to, enjoy in the future. And to the people who may have that mindset, ditch it. Because if you're just hanging on to something from the past, then most likely you'll only just strive to copy those patterns in hopes of replicating that same feeling that once brought you a lot of joy, when in reality, it only brought you joy because you were new to it. Once you grow tolerance to the things that you've enjoyed the most, it stops becoming fun. And when that tolerance becomes so high that you don't enjoy it anymore, that's when you don't quit. You don't complain and you don't say it's draining you or it's too hard. What you do is you look at the thing that you've enjoyed through a different lens and a different perspective. That is called change. Change doesn't always have to mean quitting. Change doesn't always have to mean leaving everything behind and starting everything over. Sometimes change can just be as simple as looking at something in a different way, because that'll bring you new experiences, new ideologies, and new ways to go about your enjoyment. If you just try and replicate the same feeling each day, you're gonna realize that each day feels boring. And that's because it's still as fun as the first time you did it, but the first time you did it, you weren't as aware of it. It's kind of the same thing with making that hard decision for the first time. For example, I struggle to put my phone away before bed, and that makes me go to bed late. And then when I wake up in the morning and I'm tired, I realize that maybe I should have put my phone away before bed earlier and went to bed. And I find it so ironic that decisions that feel so hard in the moment are so beneficial to you in the long run. And decisions that are hard during surface level interactions are the ones that are most beneficial to you tomorrow or in the future. They're the ones you thank yourself for. And it's not like you can make those decisions every day just because we're human. We can't expect ourselves to just make perfect decisions and always be on the perfect behavior all the time. It's honestly a better thing if you allow yourself to breathe, have some tolerance for mistakes. When first getting into discipline and I saw results, the one mistake I did was try and push harder to get more. That's a very big mistake I see many people make, is when they get good results in their life, they think that the answer is more effort, when in reality, the true answer and the best thing that you could do for yourself in that moment is just to relax. Don't try and push the gas up higher because that'll only make you burn out more. The best thing you could do for yourself when things are going well is to just maintain consistency in the things you are doing well. When you maintain consistency in the things you are doing well, that helps you build a routine and that helps you build a standpoint. It builds consistency and it doesn't just make your life go so up and down. Because when you go up and you just keep trying to go up and up and up, eventually at some point you have to come back down. And when you come back down after seeing so much positivity and so many results in your life, it's demoralizing and you view yourself as subhuman. You think something's wrong, when in reality it's just life. That's just how life works sometimes. We can't expect ourselves to just go up constantly. And I think that's why it's so important to just allow ourselves to not be so hyperfixated on the results. I believe the best way you can grow as a person is to make hard decisions consistently. It doesn't have to be every single minute of the day you're doing rigorous hard work. But as long as you make more hard decisions than you do easy ones, you will live a better life. However, if you make these hard decisions and only pay attention to the outcome, you will live a miserable life, because outcome-based thinking only drives you to focus on the results and not the process of it. And if you don't focus on having a strong process and a strong foundation in your mind of how you want to go about your life, you will only go fast and you will not go far. Very simple. So next time you are tasked with a hard decision, don't pressure yourself to just make it perfectly. But as long as you do it more than you don't, I believe that is the best way to make your life easier.